It was a great thing to do, and the fact that thousands and thousands of families did this showed that it was on the right track. And we've now got amongst the best housed nations in the world. And that includes the people who are still in social housing. Their properties are in far better state than they were 20 or 30 years ago. Far better. And that's largely due to Margaret Thatcher.
Not all observers are quite so enthusiastic. Some allege the sale of council houses has contributed to a shortage in social housing and even fuelled the buy-to-let market.
I think the longer-term impact has been disastrous, frankly. The public stock of public housing has been irredeemably reduced. Nothing's ever been done to make up for that loss for these sales to private tenants, and I think it has had a catastrophic effect, and that's why people now say they can't afford to buy houses and all the rest of it, because council housing is no longer an option. But that doesn't alter the fact that in the short term it was extraordinarily popular, with especially that group that the Tory party at that stage was really targeting, the sort of more prosperous elements of those who at that stage were earning weekly wages, not salaries or anything like that, and who were, I suppose, regarded as the C1s, C2s of the electoral kind of, lineup of how you look at classes.
As Mrs. Thatcher had intended, her economic reforms struck at the heart of socialism, leaving it as good as dead.
Maybe she was responsible for the creation of New Labour. She, I think, would like to believe that. She'd like to believe, above all, that she killed socialism in Britain. And I think you can say that in terms of what the old believers always stood for, nationalisation, full employment, all that kind of thing, I think that she can claim to have killed the spirit of old Labourism.
Britain changed the way it did business, and that, in turn, had an impact on the social fabric of the nation.
Everybody's crazy, materialistically. They're all sort of, because somebody's got a 27-inch telly, I've got to have a 33-inch telly, whether you can afford it or not. That doesn't mean a thing, Everybody's into spend.
It was a revolution which took many years in the making, but which has transformed the face of this country, and to my mind makes her one of the greatest prime ministers that this country has ever had.
Economic reform didn't just apply to domestic politics. Mrs. Thatcher wanted to reduce the British contribution to the European Community budget. It took 5 years, but Mrs. Thatcher won lasting concessions. Despite, however, coming to power as a pro-European, her approach to the budget and subsequent negotiations did little to endear her to other European leaders.
It's a matter of plain common sense that we can't totally abolish frontier controls if we are also to protect our citizens from crime and stop the movement of drugs, of terrorists and of illegal immigrants.
So the message which Mrs. Thatcher has brought to Brussels, the home of the European Commission, is plain enough. She believes that Europe must work more effectively, but she is determined that the dream of the Eurocrats of a united Europe must remain no more than that, no more than a dream.
I think that some of the European heads of state did not get on very well with her, or she with them, and that was that. But
she was pro-European when she was in office until quite late on. It was only when she began to fall out with Helmut Kohl and began to get sort of towards the end of her period of office that she began to get on very bad terms with some of the other Europeans, because I'm beginning to worry about how far they wanted to go.
Mrs. Thatcher's stance on Europe and her mounting hostility towards a single currency and greater European integration alienated not just her fellow heads of state, but members of her own party. It was the issue that would prompt her deposing.
Her position shifted with the passage of time. She was a vigorous advocate of the yes vote in '75, and in 1985 I think we presented a document to Chancellor Kohl of Chequers called Europe of the Future, which spelt out a lot of what has since been achieved, including the pursuit of a common foreign policy. She became less enthusiastic about it, as it appeared to her, and to some extent to others, that the community was taking too much trouble in too much power in certain directions.
She felt a sense of betrayal because she said that she was misled
by the rest of Europe as to what was really going on and the scope of what would happen. And so in later years she was very, very happy to rewrite history and to say, in a way, we was robbed.
Lady Thatcher came to Brighton with a copy of the Maastricht Treaty in her handbag and a deep distrust of Brussels in her heart. Her arrival in the hall was carefully staged between debates, but party managers were holding their breath. She'd already savaged the government's European policy, more words in the hall, and the conference could have erupted.
After leaving office, she would continue to speak out against the European project, even if that meant criticising John Major, the man she had backed for the leadership, and his government's policy.
There are enough opposition politicians and media commentators rocking the boat. We do not expect the elders of our own party to join this unhelpful cause.
A show of affection at least from the Prime Minister, perhaps disguising the relief he felt that she'd not attempted a speech. But though she'd not fired off another salvo, Lady Thatcher was far from being back in the fold. She was ushered off the stage and soon after left by the back door.
He deeply resented Margaret's attitudes to him quite quickly. And of course she became his fiercest enemy and did her damnedest to bring him down in the succeeding years.
John Major and later Tony Blair would foster more friendly relations with their European partners, but warm words cannot conceal the fact that Britain has yet to adopt the euro. In contrast to the verbal combat that characterised her relationship with other European leaders, Margaret Thatcher had the willing ear of both the American president and the Soviet leader. Her special relationship with Ronald Reagan and her ongoing dialogue with Mikhail Gorbachev played no small part in helping end the Cold War. It placed Britain ahead of many other countries in its influence on global affairs.
I think the downward decline of Britain's power in the world stopped. That would have happened anyway. We got rid of the empire. We joined the European Union. We had the relationship with the Americans. The Commonwealth is what it is and not more. And since her time, we have been on an even keel. Our decline has stopped. Hugely important.
Mrs. Thatcher was also a friend to Eastern Europe. In an interview for the Daily Telegraph in 1990, Mrs. Thatcher claimed to have predicted the collapse of communism way, way ahead of others. Post-collapse, the newly freed nations took Thatcherism as the model for privatising their economies. Mrs. Thatcher, too, was a popular figure, and even now is far from forgotten.
And I was really waiting to come until this country had a new rebirth of freedom.
The inspiration of Margaret Thatcher that the Cold War could be won and that there were certain values of freedom and the rule of law which should be applicable to all societies and were just there waiting for the societies of Eastern Europe to apply them. That has always been an inspiration to many of our colleagues, particularly on the centre-right of politics, in countries like Poland and the Czech Republic, so they are very conscious of her legacy as well.
Further afield, her influence is still felt in the former British colony of Hong Kong. Working with her Foreign Secretary, Geoffrey Howe, she signed an agreement with China in 1984 that guaranteed, once the British lease ran out and the colony was handed back to Communist China in 1997, Hong Kong would continue to experience a degree of autonomy and retain its capitalist economy.
We are privileged today to take part with our Chinese friends in the unique occasion.
Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese negotiator, was a man of equal calibre to Margaret Thatcher, if you like. But he knew that my client was as awkward as he was, and it helped us to get the right result.
Mrs. Thatcher's pragmatism allowed her to negotiate a constructive settlement with a communist regime,